So welcome to Rebel Road Career Stories, and I'm really excited today because I have Amy Schultz on the line from San Francisco, Director of Product Recruiting for LinkedIn. Woohoo!
Yay, thank you, Jen. Nice to spend my morning with you.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, so eight o'clock in the morning to talk about your career. Have you had coffee yet?
I haven't actually, so if I'm not making sense, I'll blame that.
Okay, fine. Well, I've had too much coffee probably today, so
Okay,
yeah.
we'll balance each other out.
Awesome. So I think we connected, I think quite a number of years ago when you were maybe you were doing a project at Sanofi. I think you were recruiting
Yes.
for Sanofi. And since then I have been following your LinkedIn posts, and you're like one of my favorite LinkedIn posters. So I'm always like, what's Amy going to post now?
Good that I'm keeping you guessing.
Yeah, exactly. Keeping me challenged. No. So today we want to look and chat about your career because, as we just chatted about, you're a woman of the world and have been moving from one side to the other. So I really wanted to chat to you about your career and get your insights, your hot tips, what's gone well, some of the challenges, and So, but I mean, even before we talk about your career, what did you want to be when you were a kid? Like when you were growing up, what did you want to be?
I think as any kid, I wanted to be a bunch of different things, but I definitely wanted to be an actor for a really long time. And towards the end of high school, I wanted to either be a journalist or work in marketing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so when I was applying for university courses, they were kind of the courses I was applying for. And when I think about how I ended up in recruiting, I suppose there's an element of marketing definitely in recruiting and journalism, in the sense that it's a role where you need to communicate and tell a story and ask questions and probe. So I didn't think that that's where my desire to be either a marketer or a journalist would lead me, but it's worked out okay.
Yeah, it's funny how sometimes those early interests and skills, when you look back, it makes sense, but at the time you're like, yeah.
No, at the time it did not.
Because I was the same. I think I never, I guess no one really sets off, as a child saying I want to be a recruiter. Sometimes
no one does. No one ever does. And I'm yet to speak to a recruiter that said yes, that's what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And there's no courses. It's not like you go to university and do a Bachelor of Arts in recruiting.
Yeah.
You can do human resources, obviously, but not recruiting. And so no one kind of ever thinks about it. And then whether they do it to get a visa, as was quite common in Australia, and or that you kind of fall into it, or someone says, hey, you should give this a go.
Yeah.
And so it's something I think that finds people. You don't necessarily find it.
Yeah, and then it makes sense. You think,
yeah,
right,
totally.
Yeah. But I think that's sometimes people think that recruitment, there's limitations on a career you can have in recruitment. But as you've demonstrated, I mean, recruitment it's just the beginning.
Yeah, it is, and I think when you realize how important talent is to a company, and at LinkedIn, we say talent is our number one priority, and generally, that's where a company's the most of their expenses goes on their employees, their talent.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore it is super important. You can't do anything without people or talent. So I think when you think about it like that, then this industry and this type of job can take you anywhere.
Yeah. So let's talk about your career, because I mean, you're sitting in San Francisco now, but from Australia, you've been a few different places.
Yeah. I think when I finished university, I worked in radio for a while, and I did sort of lots of different jobs. And, it took me a while, I think, to find what I sort of call like my first proper job. And that was really hard. I remember being like really down and comparing myself to, my friends who all had, you know, what I saw as, you know, professional jobs, and, you know, they were earning decent money, and I just felt like I was kind of just doing lots of bitsy stuff. And I had a friend who was working at a company called PageUp, and they're an Australian, you know, now like a success story in Australia, and their core product then was applicant tracking system. And she'd started working there, and they were looking for someone to be a customer service representative, I think was the title then. And she referred me, and I had an interview, and I don't think on paper, you know, was I like the ideal candidate, but I think they saw potential in me, and gave me a go. And, you know, I'm still friends with both of those people that interviewed me, Deb and Carly, and I'm so grateful for them, because, you know, they saw potential, they gave me a go, and that just sort of set me on a path that I wasn't expecting. So that was how I sort of see my first proper job. And so recruiting for me, you know, began within technology, and supporting customers using this product, PageUp People, to manage all of their recruiting. And then I was there for a few years, and then got an opportunity to join a startup. And that was a company that was set up to be the exclusive recruitment provider for ABC Learning Centres. And at that time, they were Australia's largest childcare centre company. And I knew nothing actually really about recruiting. I knew nothing about childcare. I knew nothing about building a team, managing people. And it was like a really true startup. And I learned a lot. I think I made a lot of mistakes. And I look back at that time and think, I'm pleased that I'm so grateful that I had that experience. And you learn from your mistakes. And it was, we just before the GFC, ABC Learning Centres went into administration. And they were our only customer. So when they went into administration, so did we. And you know, it was really difficult at the time, but I'm grateful that I had that experience of building something, and then also kind of having to dismantle it at the end. And I think within recruiting or HR, that's super valuable experience, that whole kind of life cycle, and what that's like both to manage and go through. And so it's kind of those sort of crazy times that you have in a startup. Some work, some don't. But while it was going, it was great experience. And then I moved in-house in recruiting. And then at Spotless, which at that time was sort of one of Australia's largest employers. And then I moved into Hudson, a recruitment company, and that was sort of a great opportunity for me, because that saw me move from Melbourne to Sydney, and then Sydney to Shanghai, and then that just kind of set me on a totally different path.
Melbourne to Sydney, maybe not too far away, and then
you know what, Jen? Actually, Melbourne to Sydney was probably the hardest move. And because Sydney's very cliquey. I don't know if you know Sydney, but you know, it's beautiful, and there's a lot of water and a lot of bridges, and people don't like crossing bridges. And I found the first 6 months really hard going. And I think at one point I was thinking about moving back to Melbourne, and I'm pleased that I stuck it out, because if I had moved back to Melbourne, I wouldn't be sitting here in San Francisco talking to you for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting, because I had that when I moved from New Zealand to Perth. I found that as well. It was really that first 6 months, just trying to find your social circle and how you fit in, because so many people in Perth had just grown up in Perth and then never left.
Exactly. Exactly. It's, you know, I was so, I think back to when I was in Australia, I was really closed. You know, I had a lot of friends, and I was super lucky to have the amazing friends that I had, but I didn't really open myself up to meeting new people that much. And, you know, when I look back on my friends, they weren't necessarily a really diverse group. You know, generally they kind of all looked similar to me, had, you know, similar-ish backgrounds. And, you know, that's the other thing that I think living and working overseas, you have to or just even moving, to different cities, you have to go out there and put yourself out there and meet different people. And I, now go to things where I don't know anyone, and your friend date. I'm sure you've done that, and through that I've met people that I never would have perhaps otherwise. And I look at my friendship groups that I have now in different countries, and they're super diverse and interesting, and so that kind of just opens you up. I think both like emotionally and mentally to new things.
Yeah. So Shanghai, how was that?
It was nuts. It was crazy. But the best thing I ever did, like without doubt, the best thing I ever did was move to China. And I had some coaching before I moved. I had a session with a cultural awareness coach, and it was, all you need to know about the China culture in 3 easy hours.
3 hours.
Yeah. But it was so valuable. And I remember the coach telling me, if you expect people to act and react as you would, you're going to go crazy.
Right.
You cannot expect people to think like you, to act like you, to react like you, to make decisions like you. You need to kind of fully embrace that you are somewhere that's essentially like 180 degrees away from how you've been sort of brought up to think and act. And if you embrace that, it'll be amazing. But if you fight against it, it's going to be really frustrating. And that was just such great advice, because I just kind of, you go with the flow, but you kind of go, okay, well, what's today going to bring? Because you knew that you were going to see something that you'd never seen before, experience something that you were never going to see again, potentially. And you never knew where a day was going to take you in Shanghai. And so if you kind of embrace that, then it's like a crazy, crazy adventure. And I met amazing people. I grew a lot personally and professionally, have stories that I'll dine out on for years to come.
We'll maybe get you drinking gin. We'll maybe do an evening session with you sometime, drinking gin. Get some of those stories.
Yeah, totally. But it was super cool. And the population of Shanghai when I was there was about 26 million people, which is the same size as the whole of Australia.
Yeah.
And I think that there was, when I was there was a couple of 100,000 expats. So it was quite a tight-knit community, and people really looked after one another. And everyone knew what it was like to be in your shoes, fresh off the plane, with that kind of crazy look in your eye. And I felt like just people were super, super, super welcoming. If you got to the weekend and you didn't have plans, it didn't matter, because you just knew that someone was going to invite you somewhere. And I just found it was actually far easier to make friends in Shanghai than it was when I moved to Sydney.
Yeah, actually, it's really interesting, because now you're talking about it, it does resonate. From when I moved to New Zealand to Perth, it was more difficult, but actually moving to Edinburgh, moving here, actually it was so much easier, because I just joined a netball team, a touch rugby team.
Yeah.
You knew that there was a pub that if you just turned up on a Friday, every Friday night there'd be a group of people turn up. And actually it was, and people were much more like, oh, do you have plans? Come and join us, or
Exactly. And I now look back and wish that I was more like that, when I was in Australia, and more open and kind to people that, had maybe moved to Melbourne and found it hard.
Yeah. So then how did you then moving to Shanghai and then moving
to Singapore.
To Singapore next, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I had a great 4 years at Hudson, and I was enjoying life in Shanghai, and LinkedIn reached out, and there was a role in Singapore, and it was kind of a newly created role to lead a team for recruiting in Southeast Asia, Hong Kong and Japan. And I think LinkedIn had totally changed the way I did my job,
Yeah.
totally changed the way I networked, shared content, read content, recruited, everything. And, to be part of kind of that disruption was a really great opportunity. And but I wasn't sure whether I wanted to move to Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
I thought after Shanghai, is Singapore going to be a bit boring? Because it's very different and great for families. And I wasn't sure, but I went over for a weekend, and I was pretty much like within 10 minutes of being there, I was looking around, going, "Oh yeah, I can totally do this. This is fine."
Get used to it. Yeah.
Yeah. This is all good. And yeah, was there for just over 3 years and loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I was saying to someone yesterday, actually, I'm grateful that I went from Australia to China to Singapore,
Mm-hmm.
because I appreciated Singapore so much more. Like when I got there, I'm like, what is this strange, clean, orderly oasis that I find myself in?
Yeah, you must have just been like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And everything just seemed so easy, because nothing's necessarily easy in China, but everything was easy and straightforward. And so I think I appreciated that more. Had I maybe moved from Australia to Singapore, it could have been a little bit same.
Mm-hmm.
And so I loved Singapore.
And LinkedIn, having come from a recruitment background, and I feel like I've been using LinkedIn since like the Stone Age. Like it just
You're an early adopter, Jen, early adopter, which is, yeah. And, it's a really special place. And I don't think I've worked for a company where I have been able to align so strongly with a company's vision and mission.
Yeah.
Our vision at LinkedIn is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And when you're in recruiting, that's kind of what you're doing. You're creating economic opportunity for somebody else by hopefully helping them find a job. And so there's such a strong connection to that. And the company, like, you speak to anyone at LinkedIn and they'll be able to tell you our culture and value tenets. Again, I'll probably not work somewhere where it is so much part of what we do, but how we do it. And the leaders talk about it all the time, and you make decisions based on that. We evaluate performance based on it. And it's I liken my years at LinkedIn to dog years, because so much happens in a day or a week, and it can be a bit crazy. We're 12,000 people now, but there's still a real startup-ness and scrappiness to the company. And so there's still a lot of stuff that we haven't done that we need to do. I've probably never worked, certainly within a recruiting function, that is always trying to do better and be better. So there's no kind of resting on your laurels. There's always stuff to do.
And then so you feel like you've been challenged then.
For sure. Yeah.
No. But I think it's interesting, around talking around the values, because a lot of organizations have values, but actually to live and breathe them as employees, there is often a disconnect, I don't think many companies get it right.
No. And I think those that do, are generally, successful, both, I would say, from a revenue point of view, and then also, a retention. When you look at, what is important from an employee value proposition to millennials, and then also the next generation coming through, Generation Z, they want to work for a company that, where they can make an impact, that itself is making an impact, and generally very like a value, there's strong values alignment. I think that sort of social conscience is probably stronger than maybe, in our generation. So I think it's going to be, it's always important, but I actually think it'll continue to be a differentiator for companies when they think about their talent brand.
Because if you can nail that, people don't want to leave and move around companies. If a company if they can align with a company and feel like they're part of something and a vision, and they have the career opportunities, then you'll keep your talent. You'll keep
Totally. Yeah, I think, being challenged and engaged.
Yeah. So next, on to the next challenge. So Singapore to San Francisco. How did that all come about?
Yeah, so I've had a great 3 years in Singapore, and my role had sort of grown from when I started being Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, Japan, and then it grew to include Australia, and then it grew to include China, and so that was great. I loved having sort of China again, and my remit had expanded as much as it could, and I think that I had learned and grown so much, and I think my learning had really been accelerated at LinkedIn, and I was ready for something kind of bigger and chunky to sort of stick my teeth into. And the role that I'm in now, my manager spoke to me about it just before Christmas, actually, last year, and she said, "Oh, there'll probably be a director of product role opening up in the new year. I think you should think about it." And I'm like, "Oh no, they're going to want product experience. They're going to want, Silicon Valley experience. Like, product is generally, special. No, I don't think that's for me." And my manager's like, "Okay, just think about it." and honestly, I really didn't. and I kind of, sort of ruled myself out based on what I thought was going to be important in the role and what I thought that they would be looking for. And then when the role did open, my manager sort of spoke to me about it again and said, "I really think you should consider applying." I suppose the technical experience is something you can learn. They really want someone that is stronger on stakeholder engagement, leading teams. So, think about applying. And I was umming and ahhing, do I want to move to San Francisco because it's so much further away from Australia? I'm an only child, my parents are getting older. Like, is it the time that I move now? When they're sort of still fit and active, when I can spend quality time, or it was just, there was kind of a lot to sort of to think about. And I was walking out of the office one day in Singapore and was chatting to our APAC HR director, and she was asking me, "What are you going to do?" And I was sort of clearly on the fence, and she said to me, "Amy, you need to take more risks. I don't see you taking enough risks, and so I think you should." And I was like, okay. And then the next day I applied, and here I am. And it was kind of that, when Newton said about the risk, I kind of reflected on the times where I felt like I'd been the most successful or happy, and they were probably times when either I had taken a risk or I felt like people had taken a risk with me, or seen potential, and this was perhaps another opportunity to kind of back myself and do that. And touch wood, so far it's working out.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that's one of my sayings is back yourself. Like,
Yes.
it's just a couple of words that when I'm making a decision, if I say to myself, back yourself, it's like, what decision, what would I do if I just was being ballsy and was, if I had full confidence in myself? And then the decisions that you make, they're much more exciting, and they've kind of led me down a truer path than if I was just making decisions based on maybe the fear of it not working out.
Totally. And it's kind of like, what is the advice that you would give a friend or give a colleague? You'd probably be like, go for it. I remember when I was at Hudson and living in Sydney, and it was like a Monday night, I think, and I was lying on the couch watching TV, and my manager at the time called me, and she was making small talk, and she is not the type to make small talk. And I'm like, "Dee, like, what do you want?" And she said, "Oh, have you ever thought about Shanghai?" And I'm like, "What, to visit?" And she said, "No, to live." And I'm like, I've never thought about it.
That's my mind, yeah.
And she's like, well, I think you should. There's this role, blah blah blah. And at the end of the conversation, I remember sending a couple of messages, I think maybe to my parents, and then one to one of my cousins who I'm close with. And I must have said something along the lines of, Hudson want me to think about, applying for a job in Shanghai. What do you think, I should do? And he wrote back going, well, why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, no, like, there's no reason. Okay. But it's kind of, and I think for me anyway, if I think too long about something, I won't do it. I'm better just do it and back yourself. And what's the worst thing that can happen? It doesn't work out. Okay.
Yeah.
Like the world won't end.
Well, I had a boss who said, say yes and work out the details later.
Yeah, exactly. Fake it till you make it, like all those sorts of things. And I think that it is super valuable. Like it is really valuable advice. And I think if I could go back and give my younger self, advice, would be like, don't worry so much. Like it will all work out, and it'll work out in a way that you weren't expecting it to. And that's actually okay.
Yeah. And that's the adventure, isn't it?
Yes.
Because when one door closes, if it doesn't work out, as you say, what's the worst that can happen? It directs you into something else that could be even better,
Totally. Like I've gone for jobs and haven't got them, and you're sort of disappointed and gutted, at the time. But then when I get that next job, I'm like, oh, this is the one I was supposed to get. I wasn't meant to get that one. And particularly, internally, and I say that a lot to internals when they're disappointed that they don't get a job. And I'm like, I know it's difficult to hear this right now, but, in a couple of months, or when you do get that next role, because you'll be really grateful that you didn't get that one. You didn't get this one. And it's just sort of funny how things work out.
So you've got your mum with you at the moment. What does she think now has she come to visit you in every?
She has, yeah. I think she came 3 times when I was in China. And my dad came to China as well, and Singapore, they both came a couple of times. And yet mum's here. It'll be interesting to see whether my dad will make it to America. But it's cool because just purely by me being overseas, it's opened them up to a whole new world and different experiences that I know they otherwise probably wouldn't have had. My dad never would have gone to China or really traveled much in Asia, and now he has and enjoyed it, and has now different perspectives on countries and cultures. So that's cool. And I think, I don't really think my parents know exactly what I do. And at LinkedIn, actually, each year we have Bring In Your Parents Day. And yeah, it is cool. And it's great. And just by chance, the last few years I've been in Melbourne, each time there's been Bring In Your Parents Day. So my dad's been able to come in, and, it's cool when they see where you work, who you work with. They get a bit of a sense of what you do, but still not 100% clear. But I love that we're able to kind of do that and share what we do, because it is so much so much of our lives. And if you can kind of create that sense of belonging, even for your family, within your workplace, then I think that can kind of help with things like work-life balance or rhythm, whatever you want to call it, and they sort of get an appreciation of what you do.
Yeah. So that's a really good point around that. I like how you said work-life rhythm. Is that so how is that what you
Yeah, so I know, Adam Grant. I sort of first kind of read that term through Adam Grant, who's someone that I follow, listen to his podcasts, Work Life, which is great. And I like this sort of sense of work-life rhythm, because when you think about when you're sort of feeling happiest, and it's generally when you feel like you're in flow. Whether you're in flow with your work, whether you're in flow with your exercise, your family, things are kind of flowing. There's a rhythm to it. And I know that when sometimes feel like stressed or anxious, it's when I feel like I'm out of step.
Yeah.
And that, my sort of time is not necessarily my own, and I'm kind of not necessarily, feeling in flow. So I like that concept of work-life rhythm, because it's continual, and rhythms, change.
Yeah.
And I think if we have, this expectation of balance, work-life balance, like that in itself, we're putting kind of unrealistic expectations on ourselves, and what is balanced to you might not necessarily be balanced to me. But I think that kind of, when you think about rhythm or flow, then that's just, again, that's more something perhaps that we can control as well.
Yeah. And then you kind of, that ebb and flow, because,
Yes.
and I like that because, sometimes work takes over. Sometimes it's busier
Yes.
than normal, but if you love your job, then that's not always a bad thing. It's just about, but also being aware of that so that you pull it back and you make sure that at other times it's
Totally.
injecting
Yeah.
life in your life. Yeah.
Exactly. And, I've got two cousins. They're identical twins, actually, and they're both entrepreneurs and super successful. And they work, what other, like someone else that maybe works, 9 to 5-ish, not that none of us work 9 to 5 anymore, but you might look at them and go, whoa, like they work crazy hours, they work on weekends, they work at night. But then there's probably parts of during the day when they don't work and they spend time with their kids. Like, you
Yeah.
kind of make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're enjoying what you're doing and you're passionate about it, then actually you're probably going to be happier.
Yeah.
And happier, when you're spending time with friends or family.
Yeah.
And rather than just spending time with them for the sake of spending time and being grumpy, I don't want that.
Yeah, and that's it. I think we put so much pressure on ourselves. Like there's external pressure, but I think the pressure we put on ourselves to have this balance, can be the thing that overwhelms us. So,
Totally. Yes.
yeah.
And I kind of, I don't know how long, I didn't know how long I'd be in Singapore. I don't know how long I'll be in San Francisco. You move anywhere and you go, I give it 2 years.
Yeah.
And then, you speak to people and it's like, yes, I said that 10 years ago and I'm still here. You just kind of don't know. And so I've always taken thought, I don't know how long this will last, so let's make the most of it.
Yeah.
And, for me, like I love traveling. I love seeing sort of, different parts of the world, and America's a big country, and I'm looking forward to kind of, exploring different parts of it. And so, for me, that's important. So if I can kind of be able to do, a short trip once a month, like that's going to keep me in flow.
Yeah.
And keep me kind of energized and curious. So, different things matter to different people.
Yeah. No, I'm all about the adventures because I think,
Yes.
when there's nothing better than, you go on an adventure, it doesn't even, or you go hiking or something, it just puts everything else in perspective, so
Totally.
those little things on a, like the email, the endless emails or whatever. Mine's admin, it's always been admin, but when you
Me
when
too.
you
Yeah, I'm
when
so
you
behind on my expenses, for example. I'm like, I really need to do that.
but then when
Um,
you have an adventure, you just it puts everything in perspective and you think, what matters.
and I think perspective is so valuable. And if you could give yourself a gift, like the gift of perspective,
Yeah.
and I think that we need it. Like, I hate when I see my team, going out on leave and being so stressed about it, and going, oh, I'll check my emails every day and I'll do this or that. It's like, no, you're entitled to leave, and we should be able to manage, and the world should not fall apart. But I think that it just, that sort of kind of, that need, like we've created this, like, kind of, I don't know, this level of anxiety within ourselves, where if we're not kind of doing something, if no one's emailing us, if no one's pinging us, like, what's going on?
Yeah.
There's something wrong with my phone, is my internet not connected? Like, and it's weird, but I think if we can sort of get perspective that we're not where I'm certainly not curing cancer.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that, what I do makes a difference and it has an impact, but that it's not kind of the end of the world.
Yeah. And I think I think I remember the days before having like, I remember when I first started in recruitment, if you were a director, if you were someone important, you got a mobile phone, like,
Oh, yes.
and you got a laptop. So, when you left the office, so when you actually left the office physically, you didn't have access to your work emails, or, or no one could
Those were the
call you.
days.
And you just go to the pub with your
Yeah.
colleagues, or you'd go and just have your weekend, and and you'd get back on a Monday, and the world hadn't collapsed. So
No, they were simpler times. But yeah, it's so right, isn't it? And the consultants would all, like, they would only have a desktop and a phone at the desk.
yeah,
So they had to be at their desk, which, obviously they would complain about. But when you think about it, yeah, you could switch off at the end of the day. And, I think it's, particularly when I was in APAC, and now where there's more of a global nature to my role, like, there is that expectation that you need to, we want to collaborate, and we want to work cross regionally, and to do that means early calls, late calls, like, it is unfortunately the nature of the beast. But I think we just need to try and balance that with being kind to ourselves, but that's sometimes easier said than done.
a little bit of self-compassion, I know.
Yes, yes, yes.
So I guess, you're now in San Francisco, and you've got a local team.
Yeah, so my team is, we recruit for product. So all of the people that design our product strategy and build our products, which is cool.
Yeah.
And when you work at a tech company, that's sort of great experience for me to have, and I'm learning a lot. And my team some are based in the Bay Area. I've got some in Carpinteria, which is sort of Southern California, Omaha, and then a few that work remotely. And then there are people within the regions that also recruit product roles that sort of have a dotted line. But yeah, it's cool.
So you've been in various leadership roles, throughout your career. Because one thing that I get a lot of people asking me is, how do you get comfortable, or we talk about bringing your authentic self, or
Yeah.
being yourself, but how do you, as a leader, get comfortable with who you want to be as a leader? Is that something you kind of you personally learned along your journey, or when did that happen for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, for me, I have learnt and built relationships by doing. And, when you're in recruiting, sometimes, and whether you're a leader or not, you really are able to build great relationships by helping someone solve a problem.
Yeah.
And often that's like, help me find this person, this is my problem. And when I have wanted to build relationships with more senior leaders than me, I found that actually to be a really good way, like, help them solve a problem.
Yeah.
And then you build that trust, and talk about, trust meaning that sort of competency and consistency over time. And so I've kind of learnt that I'm not going to get maybe a seat at the table straight away, and that's okay. I'll get there, and I'm going to get there by helping people solve problems, and by building trust. And I think when you sort of demonstrate that ability and capability to both build relationships and do what you say you will when you say it, and do it in a way where you're adding value, then I think that then the seat of it, sort of comes naturally. You still might need to ask for it, but I think when you kind of can perhaps demonstrate what you will bring by having that, seat, albeit a virtual or physical seat, then I think that helps. And so I think a lot of people want that straight away, and can get frustrated when maybe that that is not possible. And I think LinkedIn has helped me to be comfortable with allowing people to get to know you,
Mm-hmm.
and not always kind of jumping straight to business,
Yeah.
and taking the time to be both interested in getting to know someone on a more personal level. And when I say more personal level, I mean what's important to them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to know about your personal life, but what are your values? What are your motivators? What's important to you, and how can I help you with that?
Yeah.
So I think you kind of build more of that connection
Mm-hmm.
with them, and then share back, hey, this is what's important to me.
Yeah.
This is kind of what's top of mind for me. This is what's maybe keeping me up at night. This is something that I'm struggling with. Can you help me with it? And kind of, I guess, showing some vulnerability and openness.
Mm-hmm.
And then people, I feel like the more people get to know you and understand you,
Mm-hmm.
then the easier it is for them to um, sort of help. If they understand you and they understand where you're coming from, like if something's not working,
Mm-hmm.
or you've said something that maybe someone doesn't agree with, if they are able to understand where you're coming from, I think that can really help work through situations of tension or disagreement, and vice versa. And often I think when when I talk to people at LinkedIn and talk to them about who they find inspirational,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the leaders that are perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's the leaders that seem more human
Mm-hmm.
and that you can relate to,
Mm-hmm.
and that might mean that you're fucked up. Or whatever that is. And so I think that's definitely helped me to kind of, sometimes you sort of, I say Amy, cool your jets, like, you don't need to like run at things a million miles an hour, like it will come. And I read something recently around, when we get into a new job, and when you're trying to establish yourself as a leader, you want to get the quick wins. Oh, I get some quick wins on the board, and that's really important. And then they're like, well, quick wins, like, is that actually what you want to do? Because are you better to maybe take your time and establish some long, like, it's not about how fast you can run, but it's how far you can run.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's a really interesting way of looking at it, and that's helped kind of me perhaps take a longer term view. And I, like most people, you get into a new role and you do a 30, 60, 90-day plan, and I'd probably try and stack everything in 30, 60.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, actually, no. You should, spend that time kind of getting to know people, listening and sharing.
Yeah.
And the doing can come later.
I think that's so true, and that's really awesome advice. That because, and that's what I work with so many people going through those kind of first 6 months and going through career transitions, and we all want to get in and do the best job. We're excited. We want to show what we're capable of. And
Yeah.
it's natural. You want to you want to make an impact, but actually, we sometimes forget to just use the first few months to really just explore and listen and ask questions, and actually that builds credibility, especially
Totally.
as a leader. If you come in and you make lots of changes, or you try to change things, then you're going to get people's backs up potentially. But if you go in and show a curiousness and an
Yes.
interest in listening and learning, then people, that's the way to get people engaged with you, and you also learn so much more, and then you can make strategic
Yes.
changes if you need.
Exactly. Because you kind of, you come in all huff and puff, and people kind of sit back and go, what's this? What's this one all about?
Yeah.
And there's no one, certainly not on LinkedIn or anywhere I've worked, that's ever knocked you back by saying, I'd love to learn more about you, your role, your team. No one ever, generally people are quite comfortable in talking to you about themselves and the team and what's important to them. And so I think that's that's definitely been my big learning. I look back on roles that I've had before where I probably was a bit bull in the china shop in the beginning, and I have slowed my roll a little bit since then.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, I was the same. I think, yeah, well, I think when I was younger, wanting to impress, and it's probably, I was probably lacking lacking confidence in myself, and so you want to kind of prove yourself and you do more. But I think as you do more transitions, you kind of get a bit more confidence, inner confidence to push back, but also
Yep.
you start to just trust you. There's that inner trust, isn't there, that if you do the right things, that it will come.
Yeah.
You'll get up to speed. You'll identify the opportunities in the role. But
Yeah. And I think I totally agree. And, I'm supporting a leader now who is like super action orientated. And I'm like, oh, in the beginning, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to need to kind of, move quickly. But then I learned, no, actually, if I can demonstrate a sense of urgency, and if I can, demonstrate a sense of like at least taking action, or these are the actions that I want to take, and these are the timeframes in which I think I'm going to do it, then that's cool.
Yeah.
Then it's not like you actually have to like take action straight away, but it's more about how you communicate and what you communicate, and the feeling that they can get from that. And that's been how I think that's how I've been able to build a relationship with that leader quickly, and understanding what's important to them and making sure I focus on that. And I think, someone said to me years ago, what interests the boss fascinates me.
Okay. Yeah.
And I say that to my team all the time. And if it's not a priority for them, it's not a priority for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go with that.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit, and you've got some great tips around career transitions because you've made some big changes. So if you could, a few of your hot tips for someone who's maybe about to take on a new transition, what would you say?
Yeah, I've at different points in my career had coaching, and I've always found that to be super valuable. And I've had mentors as well throughout my life, and have not a formal board of directors, but more of an informal, like the people that I kind of go to sense check stuff. And I remember doing an exercise a couple of years ago where I was asked, we were asked to write down on a bit of paper, the people that we trust, like our go-to people, the people that we, seek advice from, et cetera, et cetera. And, they said that list should really be no more than 3 to 5 people. Mm-hmm. So, right, wrote that down. And then they said, look at those people. How much like you are they? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, they're probably a lot like me. And they said, well, if you're going to them for, advice, and you're essentially going to people that think like you, so they're probably going to tell you what you want to hear. You need maybe to get some diversity in that group. And that was something that I was like, I'd never really thought about it like that. So I've done that deliberately. Kind of the people now that would have no idea what I do. And they're kind of giving you advice based on just what they think will matter more to you as a person, as opposed to how it will matter to you professionally. And I think that's definitely helped me make some better decisions. And as I've transitioned both roles and countries, relationships, and I think that having relationships has helped me, and making sure that you're investing in them, not just when you need them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure you're the same, Jen, in your line of work, I get reached out to so much by different people wanting advice on various things. And often they are people that I've not spoken to for years. Mm-hmm. And, I go back to them with whatever, help I can, and then you never hear from them again. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's not cool. But, when you do have those connections and advice, that you're able to then leverage later, that's so important. And so I think that's really helped me, both the networks that you build within your organizations or your professional network, and then personal. I think that's really helped me move and change, countries and roles. And friends will introduce me to friends of friends, and I think just saying yes to stuff.
That's why you're here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's why I am here. And, you know, if you're more happy in your personal life, you're going to be more happy in your professional life. And I think that you need to, you know, if your pot is like half full, you need to make sure you're kind of topping it up. And for me, that's through, you know, friendship and social interactions. So I think that that's definitely helped me as well.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm conscious of the time, and I know you need some caffeine in your day.
Yes, I do. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Jen. It's been a delight talking to you, and hopefully some of what I've shared can be of value to others.
No, thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for saying yes to my request as well.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so go have an amazing day, and
Thank
thank you so
you.
much. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Jen.